Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Slow Art Friday. My name is Christy McMillan. I'm the Director of Learning and Engagement here at the Asheville Art Museum, and I'm joined by Michelle Weitzman Dorf, one of our touring docents who will be moderating today's program. Each Friday at 12 p.m. while the museum is closed, docents lead virtual interactive conversations about a few artworks in our collection or special exhibitions. The goal is simple: slow down, discover the joy of looking at art, and talk about the experience with others. For today's program, Michelle will lead us in an interactive conversation about three artworks in our collection. We'll spend about 15 minutes or so with each one. Michelle will allow us time to look at each work on, on our own slowly before leading a conversation about each work with questions. As participants, we encourage you to engage in dialogue with Michelle, myself, and each other throughout the hour. Just a few notes before we get started. You probably noticed as you were logging in that your microphone and video were muted by default. If at any time you'd like to unmute your video, please feel free to do so. Love to see who we're talking to. And there will come a time very shortly that the microphone will be able to be unmuted as well. Please choose a quiet room and close the door. Please do silence any alerts from nearby devices, as they can be very distracting during the conversation. If you do unmute your video, try not to sit in front of a window, lamp, or other strong light source, as it makes it difficult for us to see you. Use headphones and a microphone for best sound quality. While you can log in using your smartphone, we do recommend using a desktop, laptop, or tablet in order to see slides and meeting tools on the larger screen. Make sure that your screen name includes your first name and last name, or first name and last initial. In order to make comments or ask questions, you'll be able to unmute your microphone when Michelle asks for questions or comments. You're also welcome to put any questions or comments that you have into the chat box. A third way is to raise your hand in the participant sidebar. Either Michelle or I will call on you and unmute your microphone. These Slow Art Friday conversations, though, usually are very rich and quick, so sometimes if you wait to raise your hand, you might be waiting a while. Finally, we are recording, so if you prefer not to be recorded, make sure that your video and audio remain muted and use the chat box to submit any questions or comments. At this time, I'm going to make it so that folks can unmute themselves. Please do leave your microphone muted unless you're actively asking a question or making a comment. Before we get started, do you have any questions? All right, fantastic. I would also like to point out that my colleague Kelly Baisley has joined us today. Hey, Kelly. She, at some point, will probably help me to moderate these programs as we move forward into the fall, as I might not always be here on Fridays. So welcome, Kelly. Michelle, what will we be talking about today?
Well, okay. Hi, everybody. Is my volume all right? Okay, good. So today's theme is art with an attitude. And I chose this. It was actually inspired by one of the artworks that we're going to be looking at today called Quest. And I'm fortunate enough to have seen it when it was on display in the museum. And I just love its presence and its forthrightness. And in choosing this theme, art with an attitude, what I then did was selected a couple of more artworks. I like to choose artworks in different medium, so to express the theme that has caught my attention. So that's what we are going to be discovering and discussing with each other today. And with that said, let's go ahead, Christy, to the first artwork. So take a few moments to look at this artwork. You might consider looking corner to corner, top to bottom, and really taking it all in. And in a moment, we'll start discussing. Okay, so what's going on in this artwork? What's happening here? What do you notice? Yes, Mel. Mel, unmute yourself. There you go.
I think that a very funny joke has been told on the front, or that they are having a very lively conversation. And it seems that the third one from the bottom on the left is listening intently to the upper two, and the couple of them across. But you can see that there are several different conversations going on. And that's, I don't know where they are though, because I think they may be in some sort of museum or something.
Okay, so you're not exactly sure where they are, maybe a museum, someone's told a joke, other people are discussing and talking with each other.
Yes.
Okay. Who wants to jump in next? Barbara? Unmute yourself, Barbara.
The first thing that was obvious to me is they're all skeletons, and that was kind of strange, Day of the Dead type of conversation, and they are engaged. It looks to me like it's a table, even though the perspective is kind of off, but it looks like they are around a table to me.
Okay.
Having a conversation.
I see it kind of being unsettling, almost sort of an angry discussion going on. I'm drawn to the red. I'm not sure what it is. There's red at the bottom there on the green, and then I see the red and orange at the top, so my eye is drawn to that. I can see some of the skeletal figures have red in their eyes and mouth, and some don't. But I get this sense of anger and controversial conversation.
Okay, excellent. So the color is drawing you, the red. They look like they're more in a controversial discussion. And okay, very good. All right. And anyone else?
The figures are not people, they are skulls. So rather than having men sitting or women sitting, it looks like men because of the clothing. Also, the diagonal lines lead your eye into the center of the table and then over on the other side. So if you're looking at this artwork, the diagonals create a sense of conflict or motion, movement.
Okay, noticing that there's motion and movement created by the lines, the diagonals, and drawing your attention.
And also the red grabbing your eye and then bringing it down to the yellow and then the red on the table. So
right.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Marie.
I was just going to say that in picking up on the clothing, it seemed like it is more of a formal type setting. And then the yellow in the middle seems to be more of a table, and with the different papers on it, my thought was that maybe at a more formal type setting, a business meeting or something like that, and the red at the bottom seems to indicate to me a red pen of some sort, or maybe it could be a colored pencil, hence maybe the white paper that they're going to be using for something else. But also for the figures that are distinctive to me are the two I guess men or women, two figures near the top where their mouths are more open, and you can see the one on the right seems to be very intense in what is being said itself, and then the bottom two figures seem to be the ones that are more engrossed in that, and you can see by the how open the mouths are how, I guess, engaged they are in trying to get their point across.
Hi, this is Micah. I put this in the chat, but to me immediately this looks like a boardroom meeting, and these are the head honchos of a big corporation seduced into their profit motive at all costs, hence the figures of death. It's a bit grim, but that's what I see.
Okay, good. Well, that's why we're discussing it, because everybody sees something else. So that's great. Thank you.
Mary Alm?
Yes, I'm taken by the composition in the background, the rectangular things. There's the red one on the top. I agree that the central yellow one appears as a table, but you know, there's no, in my way of looking, way of explaining that big red thing beyond it. And the other rectangle of color is what appears to be a notebook, which is the green rectangle. So we have a yellow rectangle, a red rectangle, a green rectangle, the, you know, the pen or pencil that's nice and red. And the number of papers on the table don't really match the number of people or skeletons engaged. And the one in the back left is really quite hidden. I mean, it took me a while to see that figure. I was counting how many people there were and discovered that there were 9 and not the kind of 8 that it looks like at the start. So those observations about the construction of the piece.
Okay, good. Anyone
I
else?
found
Go ahead.
interesting also on the number that there were 9, not 8, not 10, and 5 on one side and 4 on the other. Plus, I don't know if there's any significance to the color. On the right, the second figure in has a very lightish pink kind of gray tone, and the others are either burgundy, maroon, gray. So I don't know if there's any significance to that. Plus, again, in terms of the composition, all of the hands are down. We can only really see the 2 in the front with the skeletal fingers. But sometimes in a heated discussion, people use their arms or their hands, or there's no fingers in anybody's face or hands in the air. So it's all verbal, the confrontation.
Gail?
Well, this is really going off-roading.
Sorry, Gail, that was my fault.
Okay, can you hear me now? Am I on now?
Yes.
Okay, this is kind of going off-roading here, but what struck me is how a skeleton always looks like it's smiling. And those skeletons, skulls, do look like they're smiling. It's the red that I think I'm reading as confrontation. Because if you think that they're all laughing at something, the body language works for laughter as well as anger.
Interesting perspective. So we've gotten a lot of commentary about what the attitude might be. We started out with a joke, and now Gail mentioned that, you know, skulls generally to her look like they're smiling. And then we've had other comments from Laurel that this looks like a controversial conversation, and the 2 at the top and the 2 at the bottom very much engaged in a conference room type of setting, perhaps. And I like that someone noticed that the pink on the right, the second figure from the left, I was thinking that actually, because they're skulls, perhaps that is a woman in the boardroom. Any other comments on this? Yes, go ahead.
If you allow your eyes to relax and you move back from the visual just slightly, it looks almost like they're floating above, and that what you're looking at is a wall all the way, and that these might be pieces of art in a museum of some sort, but they look like they could possibly be floating. Just another idea.
Okay, possible floating, maybe art, maybe in an art museum. Okay.
Sherry, you had your hand up.
Is my unmuted now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I saw the red in the background as a doorway, and this is a boardroom or something, and everyone arguing, and the skulls as if the identity has been removed from the people. It's just, they're just, representing death instead of life, but they're still arguing. There's a lifelessness and anger.
Okay.
The figure up in the front here, it looks almost like the skull is a mask over flesh to me, but then the hands are still skeletal.
Right. Anything more we can find in this artwork?
Billy, you have your hand up.
Well, my husband just asked, he said, the question, have they been there talking for so long that now they've turned into skeletons? Kind of talking yourself to death.
Michelle, there's a couple really interesting comments over in the chat box, and I would invite some of those people to unmute themselves if they'd like. Judy says, the flow of flatness and symmetry from top to bottom makes the skull positions look like they're moving. So that was, we had talked about the diagonal lines, I think Billy had said, and for me suggests sounds, emphasizing that they seem to be speaking. Judy, do you want to fill in on that? That's a really astute comment.
Yeah, I don't normally see sound in paintings, but this one seems really noisy to me, and I was wondering why. And I think it's for that reason, because everything is still. It's all static, it's parallel, it's perpendicular, it's flat, except for these skulls that sort of by their positioning kind of bob back and forth. If you drew a line, this is a ziggy-zaggy line. And it makes me focus on the skulls and on their jaws being open, and and that's where all the action is happening. So that's where all the words are coming out. So it's sound for me. It's very noisy.
Yeah.
And then Sheila said, and Sheila, feel free to unmute yourself if you like. She said, perhaps the red represents the heat of the moment.
Mm.
Martha had suggested that skulls don't identify gender or race, so it's actually an equalizer, that they don't have flesh on their bones. Martha, do you want to expand on that at all?
Well, I'm not sure I can. It just hit me as everybody else was talking about this. We don't know if they're male, we don't know if they're female, and everybody is taken back to the basic, and that's that we all have the same skeleton underneath. That's just all I can think of is taking back to the basics.
Yeah. Marie agrees with Sheila. She says that the orange and yellow colors are on the warm side of the color wheel, and leans our minds to a heated argument. So she and Sheila, I think, are on the same page.
And I wondered if the colors were more blue aquas, if that would, and the parts in their mouth were a different color on the cooler side of the wheel, if that would have lent to a different perspective for all of us.
And having said that, Marie, so then what would the attitude be in that artwork if the colors were in that color palette you just described? How would it change it?
I think for me, even though it would show more of a conflict of engagement by people, but in a cool setting, that it would have, say, enhanced more of a conversation as opposed to an argument, if that's where our minds were going for that.
Okay, so you're saying more it would be a discussion in the cooler colors than as controversial.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, excellent.
And Micah Jean had said red feels like blood, but she keeps coming back to this. They seem delighted to me, and I think helping us to see a different point of view, that maybe this is people laughing. Micah Jean, I'm wondering if we were to change the color palette like Marie suggested, would that maybe feel a little more lighthearted to you?
I don't know. I think I would have to see it. That's really interesting. As it is, it looks maniacal and like they're laughing and they're delighted with themselves.
And then Billy, you have your hand up for maybe a last comment.
This work to me is a perfect example of why when you go into a gallery, if you cannot look at the wall text and just look at the art first, it creates an entirely different, you have to work at looking at it and understand it. And then I would look at the wall text, because I had looked at the title of this painting, and it's complete irony, but I love the conversation. So thank you very much.
So Billy, that the title of this work, having said that, how do you think that it fits?
Oh, I think it's irony. I think it's absolutely perfect. It couldn't be anything better. And I know it just because, and I'm not sure about this, when you pull up the calendar, the 3 works are there. And so I always look at them and kind of study them before our discussion, and sometimes research the artists, etc. And I try not to look at the title. And in this one, I didn't. And I got more of a boardroom kind of feeling. But then when you look at the title, The Last Peace Conference.
And so let's use that as a segue, Christy, and show the info on this artwork. So it's called The Last Peace Conference. And 100 by 57 is like a little over 8 feet by just about 5 feet. So it has a really huge presence. And because it's oil on canvas, it is just really striking, and the colors, and you can see the texture on this particular artwork. And I'm going to complete this by reading the information that I have on this artwork from the artist. So the image is representing a nuclear holocaust, as he explains. I'm so worried about the world today. He painted this in 1981, okay? So that's a good point of reference. We should calm it down by making skeleton figures nearly life-size and leaving the seat at the end of the conference table open. Quest implicates the viewer in the shouting match taking place among the figures. His image warns us of what might happen when dialogue and diplomacy break down. So thank you so much for all your contributions to this particular artwork, one of my favorites.
Michelle, this is one of my favorites too. So I was so pleased that you chose it. It's been a while since it was on view at the museum. I'm hoping we can get it out of storage and put it on view. It is absolutely striking. And I think that one thing that you pointed out when you were talking about the description is the size. You're absolutely right. These figures are life-size. And so it really does make you feel like you're in you're at this missing seat at the table.
Yeah, it's really quite spectacular. Okay, in the interest of time, let's move on to our next artwork. Take a few moments to look at this photograph. And what are your first impressions? What's going on with this gentleman? Since our theme is attitude, what attitude would you say he is expressing?
I think he looks very downtrodden. If anything, he looks very downtrodden, very sad. There is a very, his attitude is sadness to me, contemplating something really difficult in his life.
Okay.
I thought the same thing. I thought downtrodden and despondent. But I want to mention the black and white, I think really helps to bring that attitude forward, because you can see with the shadowing and the lighting, with his lips and his hands, where the eyes are kind of in the dark. So I really think that the black and white gives this picture a stronger sense than if it were in color.
Put it back on.
And then also noticing how his hands are and his arms are intertwined, I guess, trying to hug himself to maybe provide comfort as he is contemplating whatever it is.
I think he's certainly thinking or reflecting deeply. He's deep into a reflection. I look at the hat and the shirt, which are in good condition. So I don't really necessarily see downtrodden. Deep in reflection. I don't know if if it's. But he could be thinking about that last peace conference.
So he looks deep in thought to you, not necessarily downtrodden, but just contemplative.
Yes.
Okay.
I thought his clothing looked a little bit like it might be worn and a little bit shabby around the cuffs. It looks a little bit worn, and here on one part on the shoulder, it looks like it's a little worn. So I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe it is Depression era, but it looks like his clothes might be.
I think if you've ever seen a group of men that are homeless and they're sitting around a campfire, or in the daytime, they'll be sitting in the same place usually, but the campfire is not lit. I mean, or the barrel is not lit. If you look at his shave, he doesn't have a shave. His beard it's not a beard yet. It's just because he isn't shaving. There's a pale line on his collar, which shows that it's worn. And the way that the buttons on the pockets on the top part are not buttoned. But if you look at the gauntness of his hands and how he's dehydrated, I think he is downtrodden. I definitely believe he doesn't know where the next meal's coming from, and he doesn't know what he's going to do. And that's what I see.
Okay.
Gail? Gail, you're muted.
Okay, there we go. I don't see sadness. I see despair here. And I think that look on his face is the same look that we are seeing on nurses and doctors and healthcare workers today, is just complete and utter despair and exhaustion. As a side note, I also see a little glint on what would be his ring finger on his left hand, and I wonder if that's a wedding ring. So those are my thoughts. I do think that, yes, right there. And I do think over on the right, it looks like there is a hole in his shirt right as that fold comes down to the right. Yes, right there.
Yeah.
There. Yeah. But yeah, that's what I see, is just despair and exhaustion.
It's an interesting angle that the photo's taken, because at first I didn't see what looked like his legs, but now when looking at the hands and yes, and the buttons, I look like those are on his legs there.
Wow, I didn't see that. That's a good observation. Thanks for that.
Billy? Billy, you're muted. There you go.
I was just thinking that I'm not sure who said this. If it weren't for the hat, this photograph could have been taken last week. If you think about politically and everything that's happening today with the virus and everything else, it's a really timeless photograph.
And so, Billy, with the hat, what has you say that? When do you think it was taken?
Well, it looks as if it were taken in the late 40s, early 50s, because that hat was much more in style. If it had been taken today, I think this gentleman might very possibly have been wearing a baseball cap, just because that's more common. You see that more often. But the time of the hat, that's the kind of hat that my uncles wore back in the 40s and 50s.
Okay. And so so we've heard a lot of different perspectives about this gentleman and his attitude and possible being forlorn and disenchanted, and that the black and white really gives depth to the expression on his face. If this photograph was in color, how would it change what you've said so far, do you think?
Not much.
Okay.
Barbara, you're muted.
Yeah, Barbara Pressman.
I think the black and white is very powerful, and although it would be a powerful picture in color, I think the black and white is, this picture calls for black and white. It's perfect because it has a certain mood, and that contributes to the attitude of the gentleman. I don't think it would be the same in color.
Yeah, I love it in black and white as well. But you know, when you mentioned that, I got to thinking, what color is his shirt? And since it's dark, I was thinking maybe red. And what would that mean if he had a red shirt on? You know, which is quite a statement. It might reveal something about his personality.
Maybe if it was in color, it would help us figure out what date this photograph was taken, or say something about that. And we have a couple comments in the chat too, Michelle, about his eyes looking staring and blank, and then another that they look almost tearful. And Micah agrees with Martha, thinks it looks like a Dorothea Lange photo from the 1930s, perhaps.
Right. And so if you were to, well, any other comments about this photograph before I give you some information about it?
Go ahead,
Just gonna
Sherry.
comment on the shirt piece. This is Mary. I love the proposal that, you know, gee, what if it were a, you know, a tomato red shirt? It takes up a lot of space. And I had not particularly thought about that until the question of color was raised. The shirt, there's a lot of shirt in the picture, but the black and white composition doesn't highlight that in the way that a color composition would do. So thank whoever that was for that comment, because it's made me look at things quite differently.
Yeah, Kathy had pointed out that that was red. Red does look very dark in black and white photos, and I hadn't really thought about that, Kathy, until you pointed that out. So I think that you changed the way that we all looked at this. Go ahead, Sharon, you had a comment?
Okay. I was typing because I couldn't figure out how to get the unmute. I was just noticing the really strong triangle shape that comes from the stare down to the hand, down to the other hand, and then back up through the collar and up to the hat line. I was wondering if anyone else was aware of that. Also with his face, another triangle, same same
Can't
thing,
hear her.
sort of directional.
It almost makes it look three-dimensional. It's almost as if it could be a statue instead of just a flat piece. And the way the shirt is so much, maybe it looks like he's trying to keep warm. The way the one hand is almost wrapped around and the other hand on his leg, and that he's trying to keep warm.
Well, the shirt is actually a jacket. And because if you look where the buttons are, he has another shirt underneath it. No, right on his arms. There is another shirt underneath that. And I think that's probably a thicker shirt that's also being used as a jacket. I think this might be something from the Depression era, or it may be just a down and out person. And really, I think, but sometimes I catch myself staring like that when I am deep in remembrance, things I remember.
So you see this as that he's possibly contemplating.
I think he's remembering,
or remembering.
Either that, or he's wondering what is he going to do.
Okay.
Because if you look under his eyes, he has the gauntness of a dehydration, and that's usually the sign of people that are living on the streets. They don't have medicine. They don't have good amount of water, and they're just very gaunt sometimes.
Right. So what we've heard today about this particular photograph is that it seems that this is more of a gentleman who is a little downtrodden. He's thin, possibly dehydrated, either remembering or contemplating, despair, despondent, what's happening next. And that is the attitude that has been expressed by you as far as the impression that you have from this black and white photograph. And so I'll now have Christy put the info slide there for you. Was fascinating to me, Billy, as you mentioned, it looked like a 40s hat. And the picture was actually taken in 1967. And what's really interesting about this for me, as I was doing the research, is that Kent Washburn worked for the Asheville Redevelopment Commission in 1966. And he was commissioned to take photographs to document the prevailing conditions in two rundown neighborhoods in Asheville, South Side and West End Clingman, which was prior to the urban development in the 70s that basically annihilated those two communities. And so I found it really fascinating also because it looked to me, Depression era as well, or 40s right before the war ended, whatever. So I thought that was really interesting, and I also like that it speaks to actually current events today, what's happening in Asheville, and our attention to that community, and bringing that to bear. And Kent Washburn did quite a few photographs. We have a nice selection in our collection, and yeah. Any other comments about this photograph before we move on to the next? Okay. And Christy, with that, let's move to our last artwork for today. Again, take a few moments. And again, the theme today is attitude. And whenever you're ready, go ahead and share what you think her attitude might be, this woman.
I see a multitude of different emotions. I mean, I can see awe, shock, grief, delight. I think the mouth itself and the fact that the hand is disconnected and the orange tones, especially the eyebrows, just give you the sense that you can have a number of emotions there.
Okay.
To me, I see her in water. I see her hair wet and she's coming up for air. She's submerged and her arm is coming up, or her hand is coming up. And I can't get that out of my head that she's in water.
And what has you say that she's in water?
Well, her hair looks wet, and I imagine that the gray field all around her and the way it's her hand is cut off and coming up, and her arm or shoulder is appearing. I can just envision her as being in water. The rest of her body is in water.
Barbara, unmute yourself.
Well, I don't want to leave it on so outside noises, but my first impression was that she was getting ready for a selfie. That's terrible because that's so like, so she's like looking in the mirror and checking out her, you know, her appearance. I know that sounds, but to me it had been that she's looking at her reflection and checking out, seeing how she looks.
Well, Sally agrees with you because she wrote in the chat, looks like she's looking closely, like looking in a mirror.
Okay, well, that was my very first impression when I saw it, and I said, well, that seems a little, I don't know, frivolous, but maybe it is. I don't know.
So far we've got a multiple of attitudes that it could be. And then someone thinking that she looks like she just came out of water, and that the cast of color has her looking like, you know, somewhat liquid. And then we have someone who says that perhaps she's doing a selfie and looking at herself in the mirror and assessing herself. And there's been a noticing of the hand seemingly detached. What else can we find in this sculpture?
So Laurel had put in the chat box about the cuts on the shoulder and the neck. Do you want to talk more about that, Laurel?
I just thought it was very interesting. I was drawn to them. They're dark lines and they're clearly cuts there. I don't really have an idea on the significance of that, but I was drawn to it. And one of I noticed there's no teeth. I don't know, the way the mouth is, we're purposely not shown any teeth.
Go ahead, Lily.
Well, it's interesting what happens to have a figure presented in this manner, because there's only one shoulder and there's a hand that's not attached to anything. And so it's just a very different perspective of a bust, essentially, or carving of an individual. So, and I think the lines that we're seeing in the wood are actually the natural separations in the wood that the artist just worked with.
Her eyes are looking up and to the right. Both.
That's why I think that she's observing someone. It's like she's looking at something and she's about to talk to someone about it. That's how I see it. I did a sculpture years ago with called Gossip, and there was someone holding their hand like this and about to tell someone something else. And to me, that reminded me of that piece I did.
So she looks to you like she's about to say something, she's observing something.
Yeah, especially how her eyes are kind of cut over, like she's looking at something else and she's about to comment on it.
Mm.
I don't know whether this is plaster or whether it's wood. Is that
Wood.
been
It is
discussed
wood.
yet? It is wood. Thank you.
Yeah.
It could almost look like clay, even though it is wood with a carving, because of the indentations by the cheekbone and the way the nose is formed. It almost looks to me like it could be clay.
It does, with the smoothness, it does look that way.
If she were looking in a mirror and she was trying to see whether, I mean, she had a rash up in bowl, she's got something going on that side of her face. But I've done that before with looking in the mirror and trying to see a part of my face, which is hard to see.
Mm-hmm.
And so it looks to me like she is looking for something on her skin in a mirror.
Mel, it reminds me of the weird, funny mouth shape that we make when we're putting on our mascara.
Good one, Christy.
Well, I thought it looked like a mannequin that will be used in a display area to maybe showpiece lipstick or something like that. And so it would have been, say, the attitude of whatever color you would have on kind of determines your mood.
Well, Michelle, there's a couple contradictory perspectives in the chat where some are thinking that she's looking at herself, thinking that, or in disbelief that she's so ill. And then Barbara P says that her attitude is insecurity. But then Kathy says that she thinks maybe she's displaying vanity in a mirror, looking at herself and looking at her skin.
Right, which we've heard comments on that. And Barbara Pressman, how is it, what do you see that has you say she looks like she's insecure? You're muted, Barbara.
All right, I just keep turning myself off. I just don't want to make noise. I don't know, there's just, because I think of her as looking in the mirror, maybe I have that set in my mind, but I feel like she's being very critical of herself, or she's feeling, you know, she's checking to see if something's on her face, even if that isn't. It just seems like a gesture of being insecure to me. And maybe, you know, because the way her eyes are looking, it would be how you would be looking in the mirror. And maybe she is, I don't know, that's why I feel she's insecure, just the gesture of the hand and the way her eyes are looking. She seems to me insecure.
Her skin's so smooth, she may have discovered a wrinkle.
Uh-oh.
Perhaps. And what do you think about the artist choosing this color for this particular sculpture? What would it look, I mean, why do you think that the artist chose this color as opposed to any other color wash, or that this is all one color as opposed to several?
I think she wanted to be different. You know, that doesn't, the question of whether it's wood or clay or plaster is really at the forefront when you first look at it. So the fact that it's wood is cool.
Yeah, Barbara.
I think that the lack of, or it's a muted color, very, very, it's almost like the black and white. It's like so that the emotion and the features are prominent and you're not distracted by color. I think the artist didn't want us to be distracted by color when the artist made this. That's what it would seem to me.
Hi, Gail, you have your hand up.
Yes, not about the color question though, but I see a teenager here. I just see that eye roll coming and, oh, Mom, you know, she's going to say, or we're going to get that eye roll and then whatever.
We see a teenager with attitude.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Mary.
Just about to eye roll.
Mary, you have your hand up.
Yeah, it's it's really amazing to me that it has to have some kind of wash on it because there is no grain. The face, the hand, so very, 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 very smooth with no grain at all. So is there a wash?
Yeah, there is. There is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is. It's carved and painted wood. But paint being, it seems like a wash to me as well. And if you'll take a look, Mary, at the shoulder on the right side, and right in that area, you will see some grain, wood grain, and actually, you know, all the way to the right.
I believe it, but I don't see it.
Yeah, I know. I understand what you're saying because when I looked at it as well, it also does look like it's, you know, more, could be clay and formed. So yeah, very interesting. Yeah,
the color, it's really is extraordinary. And if it's a wash, to me, it looks almost as though there was a base put on the wood and then a wash of that sepia color. And to me, it does seem like the same color, but perhaps it's more translucent, transparent on the face, and then the hair. It was, you know, it was not quite as diluted, but it's quite interesting the way those two different tonalities were achieved.
Do we know if there's an ear on the other side? Like, are we just seeing the photograph? Like, if we could see the back or the side of it, do we know if there's another ear?
If you hold on, I can pull up another image.
Yeah, good question, Laurel. I was actually going to ask Christy if she had seen this artwork.
I'm guessing there is another.
While Christy's pulling that up, I'll mention, since we're talking about the features, that there's a couple of comments about kind of circling back to how strange it is that there's no teeth. And then Laurel points out that you can't see a tongue either. Sheila says spoon lady. I'm not sure what spoon lady is.
So this is an old, wait a minute, hold on. I thought I'd shared this one. Just a sec. Okay, can you see it now? This is an older image, an older photograph of the artwork where the color isn't true. It's obviously not this red, but you can see that there is another ear. I forget who asked about that. There's another ear on this side. To Sherrod's point, I think there's clearly no teeth in the mouth. I also thought it was interesting, the difference in the perception that you get of the artwork itself from this angle versus the angle we were looking at.
I agree. I had asked about the ear, and now it almost looks like there's a tongue as well. And when you see it at this angle too, you are even more drawn to the fact that the eyes are looking the way they are focusing. So this is definitely an interesting perspective when you can see two ears, two eyes, only one hand. Yes.
Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned that so we can see this perspective.
Hi, this is Sheila.
Yes.
The spoon lady was just for the person who asked, was a very well-known Asheville busker.
Oh, okay.
She was a young woman-ish, but very gaunt and toothless. Abby, yes, Abby the spoon lady.
Right.
This woman, and she had thin hair, et cetera, et cetera. This woman, or the depiction here, just reminds me of her quite a bit.
I can see that.
Asheville, she got disenchanted with what was going on. She was the head of the buskers for quite a while. Had quite a story. Had been lost her teeth because of a violent husband, I think it was, that knocked him out. And then she had them all pulled. She said, I don't care.
Yeah, she does have a resemblance to Abby. And so we have had quite a few different conversations about who this woman might be. Abby being one. Someone said a young girl. Another person said somebody looking at herself as a selfie. Somebody mentioned her coming out of a pool. And Laurel in the beginning mentioned that it could be a whole array of different attitudes. And in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the info slide with Christy and let you know that this particular artist, Bob Trotman, the artwork is called Skin Deep. And what's interesting about his perspective on what he was looking to express is, well, first of all, let me just mention this is carved from a single piece of wood. So that may be why the hand looks, you know, unattached. It's actually is attached, so that you know that. And he feels that this particular artwork embodies self-examination, and he was able to do this. He's looking for signs of blemishes, aging, and other imperfections, which is why he utilized wood. And his figures are responses to a society obsessed with money and success, offering a critique of capitalism, privilege, and societal expectation. So I thought that that was quite interesting, as you know, the perspective that he was coming from in creating the sculpture. And so I want to let you know that we're concluding our hour today. And thank you so much for joining us at the Asheville Art Museum and sharing all your observations about 3 of our artworks in the collection, one being my favorite. And I hope that it will be on display sometime soon after the museum opens, whenever that is.
Whenever that is, yeah. You know, we heard from the governor on Wednesday that we'll remain in phase 2 for 5 more weeks. So we'll continue to interact with everyone virtually as we have been doing since April. Thank you so much, Michelle, for choosing these 3 artworks. Also, one of my favorites, the Bob Trotman sculpture that we just looked at will be in an upcoming exhibition. So it'll actually be the first time that I've seen it in person. I'm really excited about that. So thanks for bringing it and showing it to us and getting us thinking about it, so that when we see it in person, we'll be able to take this conversation with us. Thank you all for coming. As always, just as you said, I think it was Laurel in the chat, these Fridays always go by so quickly, and we always learn so much about the artworks, but also gaining insights from each other. Thank you to Kelly also for coming on and doing a little crash course in moderation. I think that we'll be seeing more of Kelly as the weeks go on. So thank you and welcome to her. I hope you all have a great weekend. Next week, our discussion will be moderated by our Master Docent Doris Potash, who will be choosing works by artist couples represented in our collection. So whereas we usually look at 3 individual artworks, Doris will have 2 pairs. So an artwork each by 2 different couples. So 4 artworks that we're going to be looking at next week. So if you'd like to sign up, just let me know and I can get you on the list. In the meantime, hope you have a great weekend and we'll see you soon.
Bye, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.